Hey, everybody, and welcome to Common Good Conversations, a podcast creating deeper narratives at the intersection of faith and politics for the common good in West Michigan. My name is Nick Brock, and joining me is Sean Skinner.
Hey, hope everybody's having a good day today.
Real nice, Sean. Today, we have the privilege of being in conversation with the Reverend Bryan Berghoef, pastor at Holland UCC, and pub theologian of the podcast Pub Theology Live. But most relevant to our discussion today is the upcoming event called The Soul of Politics, happening March 10 at Port 393 in Holland at 3 p.m. The event will feature a panel discussion with Dr. Fred Johnson from Hope College, Sarah Leach from the Holland Sentinel, Christy Berghoef, communication consultant, and the Reverend Dr. Jared Kramer from St. John's Episcopal Church, with Stan Green moderating. Finally, the conversation will help us discover how we can move from the politics of fear to the politics of faith, and how our faith can help heal rather than harm our nation. So we'll be diving into that with Bryan, and he'll help us understand what the event will be like and what people can expect. So we're really excited to have Bryan join us, and we'll be talking with him shortly. But Sean,
yes,
you got to give me your update about your backyard skunk, because you sent me two photos about 20 minutes ago, and those two photos depict a skunk in a cage. So
where he belongs.
Right, where he belongs. So my question to you is, when we spoke yesterday, you said that you were going to catch that skunk with that cage, which you did, but then you were going to shoot it rather than walk it out somewhere else.
Affirmative.
What did you do?
So yeah, we did our podcast yesterday, and I got home and we actually had our niece over. She was playing with the kids, and all of a sudden she comes walking over and goes, "You have a skunk in your trap." And I was like, that's midday. How do I get a skunk in my trap midday? And it occurred to me that when I checked the trap earlier in the day, I kind of glanced on my way to the studio to meet you, and didn't realize the end I looked at was the closed end of the trap after he walked through. So I just kind of like, I don't see anything. We're good. And I poked my head around the corner, and that thing is in there. And so he sat there for a couple hours while we decided what we were going to do, whether or not I was going to go get a pellet gun from Tractor Supply and just try to take that thing out in the backyard in the cage. But I live within city limits, so I don't think that technically be legal to do so.
Yeah.
So luckily, I've got an awesome neighbor who just literally picked the cage up and put him in a plastic bag, closed it up, and then we drove him miles away from the house and let him go in a big field.
Okay.
So it scurried away, but surprisingly, he didn't get. Jamie did not get sprayed. I mean, the skunk did spray, but he didn't get anybody. But in my neighborhood, we get skunks all the time. And this was last Tuesday or a week before Tuesday. Sammy, my dog, had gotten sprayed for the third time this year, the second time within 6 months by a skunk. So I'm going to take these little guys out.
Yeah. So I guess the other question here is why did Jamie pick up your skunk rather than you picking it up? Were you so afraid that you were going to get sprayed, or was this your neighbor? He's some animal professional or having more experience with that?
He had more balls than I do to pick up a skunk and put it in a bag.
Yeah,
that
sounds right.
I've dealt with so much of the dog being sprayed with a skunk and having the house reek of skunk that the last thing I wanted to do was wear that stink. So
your neighbor is the hero in this story.
Very much so.
All hail Jamie.
Yep.
Jamie's
Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah. Way to go.
How was the rest of your day yesterday after I departed you?
I had a real nice time. So our neighbor down the street He works for a local beer company, and we had planned a few weeks ago to do a sample tasting of some of these new beers that they have in. So we had, maybe like 6 different beers, and we just did like a beer flight between his wife and Christina. So there were 4 of us at the table, and we just did all these little samplings. So really good time, and Christina made dinner. So it was a good time, good company.
I would have enjoyed that invite opposed to dealing with a skunk, but we see each other all the time.
Well, you took care of what you needed to take care of.
Yeah.
So maybe too, I'm wondering, did you make that brisket?
I did make a brisket. It was all right. It kind of stalled at about 180. I wanted to get it to 200, so it didn't turn out the way I would have liked it to. But it was a flat, didn't have a ton of fat on it, and it was only a 4-pound brisket. So I'm used to a bigger piece of meat.
Yeah. Okay. What did you use for seasoning? Salt and pepper? Anything special?
Yeah, salt, pepper, a little garlic powder or garlic salt. Sorry, and then a seasoning that I don't know the name of that we usually use for our briskets that we buy from the store.
Good for you.
Still tasted good. Out. I was pretty happy with it. You've had my brisket before.
As long as it tasted good. All right. Cool. Well, all this little talk and banter about you working hard and not really finishing the job, letting your neighbor do that, and talking about brisket and beer makes me just a little bit thirsty too. So that I think is a good segue to the guest here, Bryan. So as I mentioned at the top, Bryan is a podcast host for Pub Theology. So Bryan, just before the program, I asked you to grab a beer, something that you had on hand, assuming that you did. So welcome to the program. And what kind of beer do you have?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it. So I'm drinking something not fancy. This is from Shorts Brewing, their locals light American lager. And I love the tagline, beer in its simplest form. So it's not an IPA. It's not a stout. It's just a nice little lager, which is probably best in spring or summer. But hey, it feels like spring, so why not?
Yeah, it is a beautiful day today. Beautiful day. Spent a bunch of time outside. So perfect to have a beer later in the evening here. So, Sean, what do you got?
I have a Lafin from, you either pronounce it Unibrew or Unibrew from Canada. It is a triple. Yeah. Yep. It's kind of like a bit.
You got the opposite.
Yeah, I got the opposite of yours. It's a bit like it's a Belgian wheat beer is what it is. A little bit like a Hefeweizen though. And it comes in at a hefty 9%.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Real nice. Real nice. All right. Then I've got Founders Mortar Bloom Hazy IPA. Now, this is one of the new beers that Founders just put out. Citrusy and tropical notes with, let's see here, the IBUs, 50 IBUs. So that's kind of like the hoppiness level. So it's right in line with like a Founders All Day, because I think those are at 47. Well, all that is, so I had this yesterday and it was really, really nice. Not too hoppy, but also a real nice finish with this hazy at the end. So I'm going to crack mine as well because you guys are already into yours. So
I feel
cheers.
A little jealous. He's got a glass he could pour his in, so it looks proper.
Oh, that looks nice.
Hey.
It looks nice.
Cheers.
Cheers. It bottoms up.
La Fin du Monde. I've not had one of those in a while. How is it, Sean?
Oh, it's very good. It is very good.
So, Bryan, I just want to chat a little bit about that pub theology. So, what pubs do you frequent most when you do this? Do you have like some favorites in and around the area?
Yeah. So the groups that I've been a part of locally have been at a few places: Saugatuck Brewing, Hops at 84 East downtown on 8th Street in Holland. I believe we've tried Our Brewing. There's a tasting place that's blanking on me in Washington Square in Holland. I feel terrible that I'm blanking on it, but they don't brew their own, but they have a Brew Merchant. That's what it's called. Brew Merchant is where my group used to gather. Great little gathering spot in Holland. And haven't had a gathering at the Guardian, but that would be a good spot. Although sadly, they're moving that operation out of state. So we'll have an opening for a new brewery, I think, locally here.
Okay. That's nice. It's always fun. I mean, there are so many local breweries that there's just not a lack of interesting places to go. So
there's not. We've tried, We've tried New Holland, can be a little busy and loud, hard to hear each other.
Yep.
I think Big Lake might be worth a shot too.
Yeah, been there. Nice place, big open place. Have you been there, Sean? Big Lake?
I have not been to Big Lake. That's on the list of things to do. I'm even jotting it down right here.
Yeah, and I want to check out because I know, Sean, you've been to Railtown Brewing Company, right? That's out in Dorr, you guys said that was pretty nice.
Nope, Railtown's in Dutton. It is in Dutton. Just north of Caledonia, just outside of Kentwood. And they got some very good beer and some really good food too. You can get that Death by Cheeseburger, and it's amazing. It's a mess.
It's a mammoth mess of a cheeseburger.
Yeah, it's one of those burgers that you fork and knife the thing.
Yeah,
because it's got.
I was out in Lansing for my birthday at this barbecue joint. It was featured on a TV show or whatever, and it was like as tall as a paper towel. If you stand it up on end like a Bounty paper towel thing, it was like as tall as that, and it had a big like wooden stick through it, and it was filled with obviously the meat, but it had like French fries, onion rings, like jalapenos, all this stuff.
Too much.
You could not eat it, upright. So you had to, I asked the waitress, like, how do you eat this thing? And she goes, well, people typically lay it over and then, take a stab at it. So yeah. So
amazing.
That's too off proportion from meat to bread to everything. I feel like a burger needs to have that right proportion to it. Not to say that the Death by Cheeseburger has any good proportions to it. The thing's smothered in spicy beer cheese.
Yeah, but we went out there, the family and I, to go to that, so that was well worth it. Bryan, do you have a favorite go-to beer? I mean, there are so many good ones here, especially locally. What's your go-to?
I'm a big fan of the Tangerine Space Machine by New Holland. That is really good. And yeah, anything hazy, frankly, by any of the locals, like a hazy IPA is good. So I'm interested to try the one you're doing. I haven't had that one yet by Founders, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, give it a go. I think you can find it at your local Meyer store. Not Myers, Meyer.
Whatever.
Not a sponsor of the podcast.
Not a sponsor.
Yeah, definitely not a sponsor. But I catch so many people saying Myers that it's.
I say Myers all the time.
There
are more than one of them.
I walked into a Meijer the other day and the lady said, "Welcome to Myers." And I wanted to correct her. I'm like, "You work here and you're saying it wrong."
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just, I don't know what makes people say that, because clearly it's not on any of the building or the labeling, but it's just like how my dad says it, how, other older people and just people in general say it. So it's just in the water.
I was tempted to just say, "Hey, you want to walk with me outside?" and then point at the sign and say, "What does that say?"
Show me the
S. It doesn't say Myers.
Show me the S.
Show me the S.
Well, you could probably you show it to her and she'd be like, well, it sounds better this way. I've been saying it like that for years, so I'm not going to change it.
With that said, there's also a J in there, and you don't hear the J at all either. So there's a letter that's added that doesn't exist, and a letter that's there that you never hear. So it's kind of a screwed up word to begin with.
and maybe they mean it in the possessive, like this is Meyer's store, not the plural, but the possessive. Like, I don't know. Like if we were going to Nick's place, let's say you had a store, would you say welcome to Brock's with an apostrophe S? Welcome to Brock? Hard to say.
Yeah. I
think that's a legit argument right there. I like that. Looking at both sides.
We're going to Myers.
Maybe it sounds right that way.
We're going to the Brocks. But, hey, Bryan, this might give us a real nice segue because, talking about Myers and talking with the sweet lady and showing her outside, like, no, this is what it says on the building. It's Meyer. You should say it this way because it's the most correct way. I think, we can talk about politics and faith, right? It's like, hey, I've been doing things for a while. If I'm a particular voter, I've been voting this way and I vote my party and my platform. And even if I was to be showed like, okay, there are a lot of hangups in what you're doing, that person might still just, go tried and true to their party because they're wed to it. So tell us a little bit about the soul of politics here. Just dive us into this event coming up.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys getting the word out. And so first of all, it's going to be this coming Sunday, March 10 at 3 p.m. in Holland at Port 393. And that's, I believe, at 393 Cleveland Street, but it's also more easily accessed by 16th Street in Holland. And our goal, so the Justice Action Team of my church, Holland UCC, kind of came up with this idea, wanting, recognizing this is another election year, another sort of volatile election year, and wanting to bring people together, thoughtful people, to talk about how do we do politics well, and particularly those of us who are people of faith, how do we do politics well as people of faith? And I feel like we've seen a fair bit in West Michigan of faith turning politics ugly. And we want to sort of spin that around and ask, how can we do better?
Yeah. I want to ask a question here then is, so one of the, it's the encouragement, I guess, behind the event is to have people move away from a politics of fear. So when it says that, moving away from a politics of fear, what does that mean for the event? How is that defined, and what examples would you refer to?
Sure. Well, I can't speak for any of the panelists, so they may all interpret it differently from myself and so on from the organizers. But we kind of wanted to set the table and then allow these people to speak into that. Personally, I think we see a lot of politics of fear. I think we see a lot of politicians say you need to be afraid. For example, immigration is a popular one, right? People are coming who look different than you, who speak a different language than you, and then we label these people as or some people label them as criminals, as drug dealers, as murderers, as rapists, and that's that's intentionally done, and it's fear-based, right? To get people to say, oh, we need to build a wall, we need to close the borders, we need to be afraid. And to me, that's the opposite of a a heart-centered faith perspective, or I would say a Jesus-centered faith perspective, who always made space at the table for everyone, especially those who were the least included or who were the most marginalized. And so shouldn't we have the opposite perspective than the fear-based? Shouldn't we be saying we should know the Bible calls us to welcome the stranger and to love the foreigner as I love myself? And I think we're just seeing a lot of the opposite of that in certain brands of politics. And a lot of those brands of politics are led by people who call themselves Christians, loudly so.
Yeah, so it's just really wanting to move that away. And I wonder, Brian, so you've just to inform the listener here, and I know Sean, you might not know this yet, but so Brian, you ran for Congress in 2020.
Yep.
Okay, as a Democrat. So I
It's a
mean, you've
hell of a
been
year to do that.
Yes, it
well. I
was.
think Brian, you got the most votes that a Democrat had seen in Ottawa County up until that point, right? People were turning out for obviously for to vote for either Biden or Trump, but like you were a part of that and you saw your numbers or the party just rise up, right?
Yeah, I'm proud to say we got the most votes ever in the for a Democrat in the second district, second congressional district, as it was drawn at that time. But since the redrawing of districts, that district no longer exists. So I think I can just say I have the record for all time.
Oh. Real nice, yeah, yeah. That one will
But
stand.
it will stand. But of course, there was a record turnout across the district. And so my opponent, unfortunately, also set a record, and it was a much higher number than mine.
Yeah, yeah. It was you set the bar high, but the difference between the votes for a Democrat and a Republican was just vast. But that was really interesting to see. So I asked that I set that up a little bit to ask, like, this the fear driven narrative of politics can go both ways, so you mentioned with immigration, and that can be more of a Republican talking point. I wonder what you see perhaps from the Democrats. I might make a statement here too, where I've get emails from Democrats like, oh, hey, this is Nancy Pelosi, or hey, this is Chuck Schumer, and in those same emails it's just like hardcore, look out, look out. So I mean, how would you respond to that? Because I know people want to say, well, I guess like I just said, it comes from both sides, but what example might you cite?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Nick, that fear-based politics, not one party has a corner on it. Both practice it because it turns out it's an effective fundraising tool and can be an effective turnout, getting the vote turnout tool. And so I would say Democrats will say our democracy is under threat. And if Trump gets reelected, our democratic norms are in question. And we just saw, the Supreme Court take up this question around Trump, around whether a president should have immunity from committing any crime, period, which if they uphold that view, I think that is a reason to be concerned. And so, yes, I think both groups can practice fear-based, but I would say I'm a little biased, but I think one side tends to be more rooted in reality and things that actually are concerning, and the other side, to me, it's more of a self-centered fear, like I guess a fear that is demonizing others and it turns us to our worst selves. Whereas I think upholding our democracy is something we should all want, regardless of party.
Mm-hmm. Sean, do you have any comment or question there about this kind of fear-based politics? Because then we'll move into this move towards a politics of faith, which the event is working towards. So, chiming in, Sean.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking in relation of fear-based politics, along with my disdain for identity politics and everything. I was wondering, if you took away all the banter and everything about fear-based politics, what would they have left to run on? It'd be funny to see them run on not fear and not identity politics, and what do they call that? Running on their merits.
Yeah, no, I like that, and I think that's a great call, and I think that's what more of us regular voters want to see, right? Is people painting a vision of what could be and giving us hope for the future and saying, when we put our differences aside, together we can create something even better.
Yeah, but it still feels like it's a like a pipe dream, like every single, like between 2020 and now is like, and Nick and I were talking about this the other day at our in-laws, that like most people I talk to do not want to see Trump running again. Also, a lot of people I talk to don't want to see Biden running again. But yet here we are looking at a 2024 election of Biden and Trump. And how do we stop this carousel that we're on of we're still getting people that we don't want? It seemed like in 2016, nobody wanted Trump and nobody really wanted Clinton unless they wanted to say, first woman president. And then 2020, nobody wanted Trump. Apparently more people wanted Biden. And now we're at 2024 and nobody still wants Trump and nobody wants Biden either. It's confusing to me.
It's a great point. I don't have an easy answer to that, but I think voter apathy is at an all-time high. And because apathy is so high, I think both parties are going to lean into the fear angle even higher, because I think they know that fear might drive us to action more than hope or aspiration or all the positive things we want to see politicians run on. They're like, no, we just got to get voters out by any means necessary. And if that means making them super afraid, we're just going to play that card all the way till November, whatever.
Yeah. Do you think if there was a solid third party independent running, do you think they'd have a chance at all? Considering a lot of people aren't.
Not at all. We aren't there in a political system. All the third party can do is play spoiler, and depending on which way they lean, they're going to hand the election to the person who leans the other way.
Yeah. There's just not enough infrastructure, funding, strong candidate. Like it's been that way for years, and there really needs to be a significant movement and change in that. That's not forthcoming. There's this no labels attempt, which, Sean, I sent you that link the other day, and that's there. To me, at least, though there may be great work behind the scenes, they are overdue, right? Like there's no movement behind it. And there was the same thing with the Forward Party. You may have heard of that a little bit back again too. Like, there are these attempts and there are these moves, but the moves have to be significant. And unfortunately, it's just not there.
What would you say if, because you were talking about didn't mean to cut you off, but you had brought up a word just with financing and stuff like that. What do you think would happen if we gave them a financial cap on what they could actually spend on their campaigns?
You're talking like
Let's bring it up.
Themselves?
Yeah, the candidates themselves. You each get $50 million. That's it.
Well, I'll let Bryan to speak to that because it's probably really more personal to him.
Yeah, definitely, as having run for office, like you see firsthand how much money determines these things. And I was at a serious disadvantage to my opponent because he was a multiple time incumbent. He was willing to take super PAC money. And so he had a lot more to spend than I did. And he didn't need to because he was in a heavily Republican district. But if he had felt more threatened or felt things tilting more, he could outspend me all day. And to me, that's not really democratic when we just don't have a cap on what corporations and individuals. There's a cap on individuals, but there's no cap on what a candidate can raise. And then because now the Supreme Court decided corporations are people, they don't have a cap and corporations can just unload their money all day long, which to me is more about buying our politicians than democratically electing them.
That sounds about right to me.
Yeah, that's unfortunately that's kind of the landscape, the political landscape that we're in at this moment. But Bryan, I want to take it back a little bit. So, you were kind of looking forward towards like the 2024 election and saying, right, you think like fear based upon this kind of apathy of voters for both Biden and Trump They're really both parties may really lean into this fear of politics. But so with this event, you're like, well, how do we overcome that? We're going to try to move people out of that and move people towards a narrative of politics of faith. So what's your take on that? What do you mean by that, by having them move from fear to a politics of faith?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think
there he is. He's back.
Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a connection issue, so I apologize about that.
You're fine.
I think a politics of faith is more proactive, and it's more, I'm not willing to just sit around and complain or be afraid, but I'm willing to take action myself, which might mean I'm going to be sure to vote, but it also might say, am I willing to serve locally at some level? Am I willing to run for city council or for county government, or be a part of my neighborhood association? How can I be more civically engaged and bring the kind of positive vision I want to see nationally? How can I bring that locally? And how can I also pay attention to my local races? Too often we look at the top and we say, well, I don't like the choices for president, so I'm just going to sit this one out. But there's so many issues at so many levels that our votes count toward, that we can't do that. And so let's be proactive. Let's be hope-filled. And let's look at how we can work together, because regardless of who wins, there's a lot of work that all of us have to do to build the kind of world we want to live in. And so let's not just let it boil down to, well, we have these two choices, they suck, I'm apathetic, see you later. No, let's still stay engaged. Let's still stay involved. Let's get to know our neighbors. Let's work together to build a better world.
Yeah. So your take on it, because obviously you're one of other people who will have, they're saying this too, but what I'm hearing is a politics of faith is not, it's not really driving, say, okay, you have to use your Christian faith as a motivator, or your Buddhist faith, or your secularist kind of standing, but more duty bound or civic bound as a sense of, I don't know, being an American, or I know you didn't say this, but being maybe more patriotic and giving back to the community. Is that where part of this is angling towards?
Yeah, I guess I was speaking about faith pretty generally there, and using it sort of as a way of thinking about thinking of being aspirational and hopeful. And for me, as someone who identifies as a Christian, my faith as a Christian in the person of Jesus wants to do what your podcast is called, care for the common good, right? How do we not just help myself and people who look like me or believe like me, but help all our neighbors, which is what I think a Christian politics should look like. But also a Christian politics should, in the best sense of it, have room for our Buddhist neighbors, our Muslim neighbors, our Jewish neighbors, our non-religious neighbors, all our neighbors. And unfortunately, too many politics of faith want go the direction of Christian nationalism, which say, no, this should be a Christian nation. There's only room for Christianity in our government, in our schools, in our public square. And I think that's an unchristian view, ironically. So yes, I think faith more generally, but even if we make it Christian, let's make it the best version of that, which has the widest space at the table for everyone.
Yeah. Sean, do you have anything on this, on that, moving away from politics of faith to a fear? Any comment or question?
Well, with the way he was putting that together, it made me think of having a candidate that works with the community and kind of earns their vote, opposed to making fearing them into a vote. The type of person that's going to help the neighbor next door and help the neighborhood if somebody needs a car jump start or something like that. Somebody that everybody in the neighborhood knows is, if you need something, that's the guy to go to, opposed to somebody jumping up going, I'm the guy to go to if you need something, because I'm going to tell you your car battery is going to die. Like having the car salesman tell you how much you need them, opposed to people realizing how much they need you because you're around the neighborhood so much type deal. And I was just in my head, I was picturing a candidate like that going, wow, that'd be really cool. Starting from grassroots.
If I could add,
a neighbor,
could I add one more thing on this?
Going, that's the guy I want to run.
Yeah. I wanted to add one more thing, and that this language can be tricky because what many of us saw in West Michigan during the last election season and when the COVID-19 pandemic was hitting was people putting signs in their yard which said faith over fear. And we're kind of saying that too, but what those folks often meant was you are being made to be afraid about an illness that's made up. And so don't wear a mask. Don't get vaccinated. And to me, that was getting it backwards. Like, that's not faith, that's stupidity. That's not loving your neighbor. Like, science tells us there is a disease that can spread in such and such a way, and you can take steps to care for your neighbor by taking such and such action. That to me is faith. And so it can be twisted around, this faith fear thing. And we've seen that happen in West Michigan in a way that I think is, again, not actually faith-filled, is fear-based, and is not loving toward our neighbor. So I think it's we have to be careful how we use that language even.
Yeah, I could see that too, during the whole COVID thing. I will say that I was not exactly one of the ones that went, I'm going to wear a mask to everything and everything else. And I wasn't thinking of it as a fear. There was so much news and information being thrown around so hot and so heavy. It was really hard to kind of keep track with what's real and what's not and stuff. But I took the stance on it of, well, I'm not gonna go out of my way to put somebody else in harm's way. But I also had the convenience of, I own my own company. I'm really the only one that's in my shop 90% of the time, unless I have a customer come in. So I can stop them right away and go, hold on, we'll get everything situated, but you stay there, I stay here. I'll slide you your invoice. You slide me the cash, But when they here in Michigan, when they're saying, well, you can't go boating, and my business is based around boats and marine upholstery, they're going, you can't go boating. It was, well, what do you there's lots of people that live on lakes. What do you mean we can't go boating? So that kind of started a whole thing with me. Like, well, no. You're not going to tell me what I can or cannot do when it shouldn't be affecting anybody else,
Fair enough. And I don't want to relitigate that whole thing. I think a lot of folks were in tough positions trying to make decisions based on limited information. I guess for me, and I agree with you, like on your boat, literally, that's probably where you should be because you're outdoors, you're enjoying God's creation, and you're not infecting anybody. So go out on your boat is what I would have said. But I think the attitude of, well, no one can tell me what to do, and this might harm my neighbor, but I don't care about my neighbor. That was the view that I had a harder time with.
Yeah, no, yeah, I completely get that. And, we fought with that whole thing too of, having wanting to go visit the grandparents, but if you do that, and then you're putting them in harm's way,
It was a tricky time.
Yeah, and it's a really tricky time. I mean, obviously that it was unprecedented, but a lot of the faith, what we were hearing from, especially locally, is how people's faith can get wrapped up in that, and then the interpretation of that. So, in my opinion, it's really, really important to talk about these things in public spaces to help people understand it, instead of hearing about these things in silos on our Facebook feeds, and just getting again and again and reaffirming what we think we already believe. So it's really great to have these like churches sponsoring or participating in this event to really help the community understand. So, Bryan, just a few more questions on this event. So, one of the big things here is to talk about how faith can help the nation rather than harm it. Um, so, I guess what does that mean? How faith can help the nation rather than harm it? I mean, in my experience, and you've mentioned it a bit too, where there is, if you take things so far, if you conflate your religion with your national identity, that can cause great damage and harm, with what we are seeing with Christian nationalism. So, I mean, what references or points do you have for this national harm?
Yeah. So again, how can our faith help heal rather than harm, or how can our politics, I should say, which may involve our faith perspective, help heal rather than harm the nation? I think reiterate some of what we've talked about. I think a faith-based political view that only has room for my particular religion, that's harming our nation, because we live in a pluralistic society with people from across the world religious spectrums and people of no belief. And they each should have the ability to live fully and freely their faith without being coerced into one view. And so how are we living that out? And how are we making space for people who speak different languages, or people who are seeking asylum because they're coming from a destabilized political situation or country, or they're being persecuted? How do we create space for and support people of varying sexual orientations? How can we be sure that we're providing support for people who are disadvantaged economically? To me, those are all things that, again, that's perhaps revealing some of my political stance, but it's also rooted out of a faith perspective that we ought to take care of the least and the struggling. We ought to make space for every person to live fully and freely in this nation. But also, you were hinting at, Nick, and I think this is important, being able to talk about this stuff with people we don't agree with. And we have siloed ourselves, like, to our detriment. And because we've done that, because we put ourselves into two camps, frankly, you're either on my team or the wrong team. And when we do that, it's no longer about finding solutions that work for the best of us, because all politics involves compromise. Like, nobody's going to get the whole thing they want. And so we have to be able to talk together about this stuff. And what I found, and I'm sure you both can say this as well, is that too often our politics is fighting and blaming, and then only one side can win. And we're not actually talking about the issues. Like, well, okay, we have to deal with immigration, so let's make some compromises. We don't all agree on it, but let's come up with legislation that can move us forward based on the things we have in common, the common ground across that issue, or any other issue. And if we can't talk at the local level, we shouldn't be surprised when our elected officials can't talk across the aisle either. And so I think that's also a key part of bringing healing rather than harm, is being able to talk.
Yeah. Yeah. So before you say something, Sean, because I see you open your mouth and then me reject it, because I'm going to talk first here. It's so important, because I mean, locally, everybody knows, who's paying attention to local politics, is, Ottawa Impact has chosen that route, is shutting everybody out from the beginning, and kind of going, all right, it's my way or the highway. And then that has just cascaded into a handful of lawsuits, and then this this almost implosion of their own organization, with John Gibbs coming out and going on all local news outlets and saying Ottawa Impact is incompetent, they cannot govern. And just a reminder to the listener is that was Ottawa Impact's person. Like, they chose that person. But I say all that to say is, like, if you go that route, you are going to die on that sword. So talking across the aisle, working in a way that you can find compromise benefits the community or whoever it is representing. That's my small rant, Sean. Now you can go with yours.
Oh, I just had a small little question. I was just wondering, this might sound real ignorant too. The definition of Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism.
Sure. Yeah, I think Christian nationalism, it's multifaceted, but it believes that this was founded as a Christian nation. This is still a Christian nation, and this should only ever be a Christian nation. And it wants to push that across at every level. At the local political level, we should be electing Christians. Christians should have the biggest voice. And if you aren't Christian, you should get on board or maybe think about leaving. And it's often also called white Christian nationalism because setting our friends of color aside who are Christians, they often don't hold these views. It tends to be majority culture, white Christians who lean more conservative, who hold this view. And unfortunately, it's tending toward also supporting authoritarian governments. And it's unhealthy for democracy. And it doesn't reflect, I don't think, the true history and founding of our nation, which, yes, was founded by some Christians, but not only Christians. They wanted it to be a place that had freedom of religion and separation of church and state. And they're starting to betray some of those original founding pillars of the nation in order to come up with this new vision of a nation they think should exist. But many of us see where that's headed. And I think it's not a healthy place, and frankly, not a Christian place.
Yeah, there's that's a really good definition, and I would remind the listener that we did a podcast interview with Doug Padgett from Vote Common Good, and it's talking about that, like, what is Christian nationalism? How do you define it? What does it look like? What is it not? And we had some training events around that. But I mean, it's a really important question too, Sean. And like definitionally, like what is that? Does that answer your question, Sean?
Yeah, it was pretty darn close to what I thought it was. So I just thought, let's get some sort of clarity on the whole, on it, because is it a thing, or is it a news headline? They can come up in politics and news. They can come up with anything to, make sure you say this at the debate. Punch this line in, make sure everybody hears it, type thing.
No, that's a fair question, Sean. And I was reading an article recently where there were some right-leaning political activists and with conservative think tanks who were saying we need to reclaim Christian nationalism because we're proud of it, and we'll happily defend what we're doing under that banner. And so I don't think it's an unfair thing to say, given that its proponents also claim it. They just think it's a good thing, and some of us think it's a less good thing. But again, I would defer to other experts, Doug Padgett, Kristen Dumais, and others who are a little more versed than I am. If you want to take a deeper dive.
Yeah. John, I think it's a great question because, to bring it back home here, like Ottawa Impact themselves, they ask the question. They go like, well, what is Christian nationalism? Is it just this made up thing, this machination made up by the Democrats and left leaning news outlets? So that's how they posit it. But then my answer to that, and from others, would be that no, it's not. This has been a long-standing issue where the country could go all the way back to chattel slavery, where the religion of Christianity was used as a means to enforce slavery upon others, and it goes all the way up into the Ku Klux Klan. But then really, there are definitions, there are subject matter experts who can define it, and then they can point to examples where people say, well, this is what it looks like and this is what it means in the public space. And I would just say flatly, the biggest example and most recent example of that is the riots at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. There's a whole. We're not going to go into all this, but there's a whole documentary about this that I was at and that I support and encourage people to see, called God and Country. And this is the thrust of what the work is being done at Vote Common Good. All right, let's land the plane here. So, Bryan. So the panel has Dr. Fred Johnson from Hope College, Sarah Leach from the Holland Sentinel, your significant other, Christy Berghoef, Jared Kramer from St. John's Episcopal Church. Why these group of people? What makes this interesting or unique that should compel people to come out?
Yeah, I think it's a great panel. I think each person brings a little different perspective. So Fred Johnson, political science professor at Hope College for many years. He's also run for office himself, so he can speak not just as an educator around politics and political science, but can share his experience firsthand as a candidate and what he's seen happen over the years, and give us sort of that sort of historical and bigger picture view. And then we have Sarah Leach from the Sentinel, who I think brings the journalism aspect. And how does news and good journalism help us in our political reality? How does it support democracy, and why is the free press so important? And she, I think, has done a great job with local reporting around Ottawa Impact and the Ottawa County political realities. So she'll be great. And then my wife has worked with organizations and with schools around dialogue across the aisle. And so she has experience bringing people together from different perspectives. She's also spoken and been on tour with Vote Common Good across the country, speaking to this effect as well. And then Jared Kramer brings sort of that clergy pastor angle. What does this look like in the local church? And, what should churches do, or people of faith do, and what shouldn't they do? And how do we respect that church and state difference while also allowing our faith values to play out in our lives and in the way we vote?
You heard it here, listener. That's the Reverend Bryan Berghoef, pastor at Holland UCC and pub theologian of the podcast Pub Theology Live. But most importantly, really here to talk about the event, The Soul of Politics, happening March 10th at Port 393 in Holland at 3 p.m. So I guess before you go, I see it, Bryan just taking a swig of beer. How far have we gone in our beers? I know probably if you haven't finished it by now, Bryan, you're going to have to finish it. Okay, it's real at the bottom. You're going to have to finish that before you go.
We're on the home stretch.
What about you, Nick? Where are you at?
I think I'm about the same. You can't see it through the can, but it feels like just the bottom little quarter. You're done?
Yeah, I might be done. Yep.
Nice. Yep. Sean, we got a few more minutes to go when we let Bryan go, and then I'll finish it. But
let me get another beer.
Yeah, go ahead, grab it. Do you have another one?
No, it's in the other shop. I'd have to walk away and go get it.
I don't think we'll go that long.
And then it'd be a Coors Light.
Yeah. Well, Bryan, thanks for joining the program. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Nick and Sean. A blast, and appreciate your efforts.
Quick question: what beer do you? What's your go-to beer?
We already did that, right?
It's probably Two Hearted.
Two Hearted? No, we didn't do that. We just asked what he had, and we talked about places to eat in breweries. You should read your notes, Nick.
I know.
So,
I think
he asked something. He asked a similar question.
Yeah.
But you said Two Hearted, Bryan?
Probably Two Hearted.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
It's a very good choice. I can't drink it anymore, though.
Oh, we'll find out. We'll find out why.
Yeah.
Most people don't go back to another drink because something pretty bad happened.
Oh, no. Nothing like that. Two Hearted's one of those ones at 7%. After about 2, I start really telling people what I'm thinking. I don't know why. Like this one's at 9%, and I'm completely fine. I can have a couple of those, and we're good. But for some odd reason, Two Hearted, man, there's no filter anymore.
Truth serum.
Yeah, no,
I'll have to remember that.
I don't know. That. Just all sorts of getting in trouble with the wife is what that is.
All right, Bryan, thanks a lot for your time. You can click out of the meeting, and Sean and I will wrap up.
Appreciate it,
Good
fellas.
seeing you, sir.
Be well.
Too.
Likewise.
Two Hearted. You know, I cannot come even near Kahlua.
Oh, what did you do with
Or
Kahlua?
no, it's
or are you thinking Bailey's?
No, gosh, what was that? There was a I thought it was Kahlua. There was man, when I was maybe quote unquote of drinking age, right? Went down to Florida.
You're 42 now. You're not of drinking age anymore.
Well, so at the time, my friend and I, we went down to Florida to go visit his brother, and his brother was in the military, in the Air Force. So we went to go visit him in Panama Beach, and so we went to his apartment, and there was a friend there too. So we were drinking quite a bit, and we had like multiple shots of. I thought it was some like Kahlua based thing, and I just had way too much and ended up having it all come back up. So I can no longer do that, and that's the same for Jaeger. Like Jägermeister, just
I can still sneak a Jaeger here and there with a little bit of Red Bull. Not often. You know something? I never got hammered on Jägermeister. Oh, I've been hammered. I just never got sick on Jägermeister. I had a real bad night once on Captain Morgan Private Stock, followed by El Amaretto, because I drank the bottle of Captain Morgan and El Amaretto.
You drank the bottle, the fifth.
Yeah. Yep. I don't think I drank the whole fifth through the entire day, but whatever was. But
that's a lot.
I know I drank Guinnesses earlier in the day, and then somehow the bottle of Captain Morgan became my quote unquote walk around drink.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, that.
Oh, the follies of youth.
Oh, yes. Oh, you think about that now, you know, if you did today what you did back then, you know, to give concepts, I just turned 40. You're 43.
Thanks for sharing that with everybody.
but, you know, thinking about, 19 years ago for me, or even 10 years ago, going out partying with your buddies and then having too much, and then how you just snap back up the next day.
Yeah.
You're down.
Happening.
No, you do that nowadays. You're down for 2 days and you're just wrecked.
That's right. You can put me in some type of coma, and I'm going to have a lot of help just to rejuvenate and get back. Man, because, I tell you, man, what was it? When I turned 30, I felt it. Like I felt kind of the move, the body moving in a different direction. And then when I turned 40, I felt another iteration of that. And I thought, I could stave this off because I was, working out a lot. I was exercising really, really healthy and fit. But, there's just so many things that get in the way as you get older. I get a family, all that stuff. Other stuff becomes more important. But, just from that standpoint of, slugging some beers or whatever, there's absolutely no way of turning that around within 8 hours of sleep.
No, absolutely not. I remember it was a New Year's Eve. I had a couple friends over. We drank a fifth of Crown Royal Maple.
Disgusting.
Oh, yeah. And then I had to go back to work the next morning. I had to be to work at 6:30, and I went to bed at 4. And then I got up at 5:45 to go to the studio to edit a radio spot, and then ended up getting to the shop at like 7, and I was working a mechanic shop, and everybody knew what I had done. I was only supposed to be there for like 4 hours, but everybody could smell it. And just they'd walk up. We had metal benches, and they'd walk up with a big old hammer and slam it on the bench. How you feeling today?
Yeah. You know what makes that so how you could work through that at that age is you can get through your day of work, and then you know that when you go home, or at least me, when I go home, you can just go right to bed.
Yeah.
You don't have to interact with anybody else. You got no kids to take care of. You don't have to make dinner for anybody. You don't have to go over schoolwork. You're just like, okay, I can buck it up for the day. I'm gonna Ralph and what's that?
Ralph and
What's that?
Barf and Rally.
Yeah, you could do that, but that's not happening.
I have never done that. I know guys who used to be able to do that, and I could never. Once it comes up, my night's done. I couldn't. It's all over.
So do you have any outside of these beer or alcohol induced adventures? Do you have any takeaways from the conversation talking about moving away from this narrative of politics of fear and more towards a politics of faith? You got any comments on that?
Yeah. What it's the March 10th, right? Was that the date? I'm sorry.
Check. Yeah,
Okay.
I said it a couple times.
I know you
March
did.
10.
And I made a lot of notes too.
Yep, March 10.
Yeah. It's hard sometimes in these conversations that we have on this podcast. Sometimes it feels like some of the conversation is pretty basic common sense stuff. When you think about it a little bit. So I mean, treat your neighbor how you want to be treated and everything. And getting away from fear. It just feels like common sense to try not to be living in fear and pushing fear, and and try to wrap things around a positive twist on everything, whether it be a religion or anything else. That's why I was so kind of taken back when he was talking about, working with the community. It starts from the grassroots if you want to get things changed in the bigger upper echelons of politics. It starts down here, where we're at, where you're at, where he's at, and being part of the community where you're at now. And it was kind of refreshing to hear somebody talk about being part of the community, opposed to feeling like the community should be part of you because you're the candidate, you're the one running, type of deal.
Yeah. Bryan made this point too, like how both sides, can lean into this narrative of fear, but they can also both lean into the narrative of faith. And then that faith can mean vastly different things. He mentioned, with like Auto Impact and, similar types of groups, they use that moniker slogan like faith, family, and freedom. Now those sound, who would reject that? That sounds like you and I would go, yeah, 100%. But when we get down into it, it means different things to different people. So it's really difficult for the voter to suss all this out, right? Like, okay, what does this mean for you? Let's just say as a Republican, or what does this mean for you as a Democrat? Because as we've learned, really different. So it's a difficult job for the voter, and that's why I think it's really good that these events are open to the public and people are willing to speak up. But it's what I want to see is then those candidates who purport those things, that they are willing to ask questions from voters, tough questions.
That's one thing I want to see too, is tough questions. I had asked, on our last podcast when we were talking about doing our live episode on March. Correct me because I'd probably be wrong. March 24th, right? is when our
the live event.
Yeah, the live events, March 24th.
Park Theaters.
Yep.
Sunday, 6 to 8 p.m. with special guest Christian Kleinjans and live music from Daniel Dietrich.
I'd asked if we're going to, if we're going to take emailed questions or if we're going to have a microphone there and everything. And I'd like to hear people be able to give hard questions to politicians and not grandstand sometimes, where you get these, what are the trolls, like you get on the internet where they show up and they feel like they've got that loaded question or this loaded comment that they fire at you. And you see whoever the person is that day go, do you have a question or are you just trying to nab me on something, and here's some good questions and I'm tired of hearing politic questions where you watch a debate and you ask them a question and they spend 3 minutes of their 4 minutes thanking everybody for having them. Thank you for having us here in Washington, D.C. for this debate. It's just a gorgeous night tonight and yada, 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 yada. No, I'm sorry. I asked you about abortion and you're not answering anything.
Yeah. Don't get into that spin zone. Stay on task. Stay focused.
Yeah. Stay on target.
Yeah. So we can plug 2 events here, right? Not only this upcoming one for the Soul of Politics, but our Common Good Conversations Live. So seriously, I really do hope that, our listener base will send questions. But, I know that there are those who kind of check in on the Facebook page and they vehemently disagree with everything that, Vote Common Good stands for. And I would encourage those folks to send questions because it's important. So if those questions are based in fact and in real concern, I want to ask those questions because what I don't want to do is open the mic up at the end because it just becomes a little more chaotic.
Oh yeah, I get that.
So listener, send those questions to us at votecommongood.wm@gmail.com. Subject header of live event. Sure. Anything else?
No, I think that's probably a good spot to land the plane.
Yeah, that's mine. That's my phrase to use. Landing the plane. Hey, listener, you this is how you can follow us. We'd encourage you to check out our website at votecommongood-wm.org. Just updated that thing with all these events that we got coming up. So check that out. The podcast is also there as well. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter. Be sure to follow us on Facebook. We are at 800 and some followers. We want to push past that and get to 1,000 followers. So help us over there by giving us a good follow. And Sean, this is kind of a funny thing. I've been saying this in previous episodes is you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. But, if they're already listening on one of these things. So that might be redundant.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah, thanks. Right. We've got this little thing going now where the podcast is full of grace and we are being graceful. But as we go along, we'll figure out how to call each other out. All right. I think that's all, everybody. Thanks for joining this Common Good Conversation. Be sure to share this program with your family and friends. If you have questions or would like to be a guest on the program, you can reach out to us at previous email, votecommongood.wm@gmail.com. Sean, you have a goodbye?
Goodbye.
All right. Until next time, be the Common Good in West Michigan. Peace.
See you guys.